You'd be forgiven for thinking that this was a full-on Paris-Dakar racer, but it's not. This is the new Ducati Desert X. And let's just deal with the elephant in the room. Yes, this is technically an off-road bike, but this has been designed to deliver both off the road and on the road. For the handlebars can be adjusted depending on what surface you're on, and while Ducati claims to have spent 80% of the development time off-road, they're only expecting about 10% of people to buy one to actually take it off-road. So we'll leave the off-road tests to the big boys. There's no deserts in Northamptonshire. The question we're interested in answering today is, how good is the thing on the asphalt? So, let's go find out.
Well, first job done is that I'm on the thing, because this is obviously a relatively tall bike, and I am not a relatively tall person. But now that I'm on it, I actually feel quite comfortable. The seat is nice and plush, and there is quite a lot of play in the suspension, so it sags a little bit when you're on it, but that's quite a good thing. And having this head-up display on it, where it's sort of vertical, it feels a little bit like having a smartphone in front of you, and it's actually quite confidence-inspiring, and everything feels nice and light. Like the clutch is light, the gearbox is light. Jumping on this after being on like a Street Fighter, for example, you can tell instantly that this is something that is more for sort of nice long tours. You've still got some power if you need it. In fact, there are loads of different driving modes. I'm in urban at the moment, just because we've got a mix of different roads. We could go into tour or even sport, and obviously there's some specific off-road settings, but we're not going off-road today. But these big wide handlebars feel really comfortable. You got nice grip on the grips. I feel like this is definitely a bike that you could chew the miles up, and I know this is meant to be more an off-roader, or at least Ducati would like to tell you that it's an off-roader, but the reality of it is that most people are not going to go off-road on this. They're going to tour on it, and as a tourer, I mean, I think it fits the bill quite nicely. There's no lariness with this. There's no feeling like you need to squeeze the throttle on too much. It'll quite happily do the speed that you need it to. We're going along at 50 mile an hour here, and I feel like I'm riding in town. Everything's just sort of calm. Obviously, if you start going into the mud and jumping and things will get a little bit different, but I just feel nice and confident on this. The brakes are good, but you don't get the same sort of bite as you'd get on a sports bike, obviously. All the controls are nice and light. This is not a bike that you're going to jump off it and feel like you've done a hard ride. This is one that you could quite happily sit at whatever speed you want to sit at, get to your journey, and feel like you're ready to jump back on it and go again. I actually find myself, as I'm sitting on this, you know, as I say, we're pootling along, we're not doing crazy speeds, we're only doing 45 mile an hour down here, but I find myself looking around at the scenery a bit more, looking at the beautiful fields around Silverstone. Not so much the roadkill on the side of the road, but, you know. The one thing I am worried about a little bit with this is obviously chewing up country roads and motorways. That's all fine. It's when we get to things like traffic lights and I need to get my foot down. I was just speaking to the guy at Ducati, and one of the test riders of this, he could get on it, but then he couldn't do the side stand, which is a little bit of a problem. You're going to have to sort of park up next to a high curb or something, which, again, this is not the type of bike where you're necessarily going to be riding it around with high curbs. There's some here, but yeah, if you're going to have to stop somewhere and you can't get the side stand down or up, that's a problem. If I was 5'10" or higher, taller even, then I'd probably be okay, but at 5'8", I'm right on the limit. However, one thing, with the bike being so tall, at least it's tall for me anyway, one thing that it does do is it incentivizes you to learn how to ride without putting your feet down as much, which is not a bad skill to have, obviously. And the fact that everything does feel so light despite it being a big bike means that you've got the confidence to move around at slow speed without feeling like you're fighting to keep the thing up or to feel like the engine going. I rode the Street Fighter V2, and when that got to low revs you really started to feel the engine rumble. It felt like you're on a Harley Davidson. But with this, it just takes everything in its stride. Now, this head-up display, it's not really a head-up display, but you know what I mean. You can change all the different rider settings in this, and technically speaking you can do it whilst you're out on the road and while you're moving, but you have to be off throttle. There's buttons on the left-hand side here which allow you to enter the different modes and cycle through them. It's relatively easy to do, and you could probably do it on a long straight road, to be fair, but I think, well, I'm still not that used to the bike. I'm probably just going to leave it in urban, because urban will give you everything that you need. The only thing that really changes when you're on the roads, when you're switching between different modes, is sport will turn the traction control down a little bit, but you've still got the same ABS settings and everything else that you'd have with some of the other settings. So urban is pretty much all you'd need. Touring is pretty much just the same. The only radical changes are really if you're going to go into sort of a wet mode or an off-road mode, then things start getting a little bit different. You get slightly different electronic suspension settings, you get the different traction control, different wheelie control. So it does change it up a little bit when you're on very different type of roads, but between a mix of touring, fast country road riding and riding in town, I wouldn't bother switching it out of urban, if I'm totally honest with you. So even though you've got the full suite of Ducati electronic controls in all those different modes, it feels a little bit overkill. Certainly if you're the type of person that's going to take this into the environment where, you know, a lot of the development was done and really put it through its paces, then you'll enjoy having them. But for most people, I don't know if it's really necessary, and obviously having all that stuff contributes to the price as well, which is a thing with Ducatis. The price is never low. Ducatis are a premium bike, so having loads of added features which just ups the price even more might put a few people off. They might start looking at the competition a little bit more, which is not what you need when you're trying to introduce a bike like this and steal some of the market share away from some of the more established boys. Having said that though, I feel right at home on this straight away. If I had the ability to lower the ride height, I would do, but I understand, you know, you want good ground clearance if you're going to be touring on this or taking it off-road. You want good ground clearance, so you don't want the ride height to be too low. I'm looking at this purely in terms of riding on the roads. I don't know how comfortable I'd be with the ride height being what it is, but certainly once I'm moving, this feels great. Yeah, when I am stopped, I am right on my tippy toes, but I've still got a decent amount of control, but it is yeah, it's not ideal.
Make no mistake, this is a lovely bike to ride, but it is way too tall for me. And I'd say that I'm too short for it, but Ducati have told me that one other journalist managed to get on but couldn't do the side stand, and they had another one immediately drop it and take out two other bikes with it. And full disclosure, I couldn't hold it up either and ended up having to lay it down on its side at one point. To ride, it's actually fantastic, but if you're under 6 foot, I'd really advise against this being the bike for you. For the taller of us and those with a lot of off-road experience, then the rest of this review is for you. When you take a look at this bike, it looks rugged and utilitarian, with that big belly pan and 21-inch front wheel. But don't be fooled, there's a lot more to this bike than you think. There's the full suite of Ducati electronic controls on this, not to mention 6 different rider modes. And to be fair, you'd hope that there's a fair amount to it, because like the rest of the Ducati range, it's not cheap. It's 14 grand. Now, obviously, as we've pointed out before, we're not expecting a Ducati to ever be a bargain, but even so, in a tough financial climate, potential buyers are going to be paying more attention to the price tag than in the past. But if you were looking for a bike to tour on that could do just about anything, until now you'd be looking at the BMW GS, Yamaha Tenere, something from the KTM range, maybe an Africa Twin or Triumph Tiger. But you've got a real contender with this one. It's not just about the badge. There are some great features on the Desert X, like the ability to link your smartphone to the display. And while seeing how capable it is, it's not much use when you can barely get on and off the thing, something that I found out to my detriment. Now, I'll be the first to admit that riding something that tall is a skill, but between the height and the weight of it, it's not for me. Even after bringing it back to the Ducati officers, I had to get someone to help me off the thing, because the slight incline I was parked on was enough that I felt like I couldn't get off it. Fortunately, the Ducati range is full of gems at the moment, so be sure to look out for our road tests of those on this channel. But until then, I will see you next time.